Hi, everyone. My name is Jeffrey, a PM at Microsoft on the Python data science team within Visual Studio Code. And specifically, I'm working on the Jupyter Notebooks experience within VS Code. In this talk, we're going to be showcasing some of our brand new Jupyter Notebooks features in the Python extension for VS Code, as well as Github Codespaces for data science work within your browser and on the go. And finally, I'm going to be showcasing how you can leverage all these tools to supercharge your own data science workflow to become more productive. So before we get started, to actually access these Jupyter Notebooks features, you'll first need to install VS Code, of course. It's cross-platform, completely free and open source, so it's easy to get. And secondly, you'll need to install the Python extension because that's where the Jupyter Notebooks features live. So to do so, you can just go to the Extensions tab on the left and just search for the keyword Python. Once you have the Python extension installed, to get access to the notebook editor or the Jupyter Notebook interface, you can just open up any existing notebook you have, or you can go to the command palette using the shortcut Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P if you're on a Mac, and just search for the keyword create new blank Jupyter Notebook. And this will launch in what we call our notebook editor. It's a Jupyter Notebook UI interface. As you can tell, so you have your cells, you have your input and output. And this combines the flexibility of notebooks with the power of VS Code as an editor and IDE. So to see what that all means, let's bring in a real world scenario. So let's say you're a data scientist and you're trying to graph out and predict COVID cases and trying to model all that data within the US. I have a notebook already created with that data already, so let's just close this one up and open this existing notebook. And again, like I mentioned, if you already have a notebook, you can open that up and it'll also open up in this notebook editor as well. So within your cells, one of the main advantages of this notebook editor is you have full IntelliSense and autocomplete support. So if I want to do a pandas.readcsv, I can type pd dot, and you can see it gives the top suggestions based on what functions are most used from the pandas library. So here I want to do read CSV, so it correctly predicted that. So I can type in read CSV. And as you can see, I'm not pushing tab. This automatically just gives me these suggestions on the fly as I type, which is great. So here I actually want to read this CSV. So I'm just going to copy paste this file and paste this in. So I can run the cell by just clicking this run cell icon. Or we also support Jupyter hotkeys, so I can also run the cell by doing Control-Enter as well, or Shift-Enter. And we support many of the Jupyter hotkeys, so you can just push Escape. You can go into command mode. You can move around. You can add a cell below by pushing B, and then again you can just delete the cell by pushing double D. So although notebooks are flexible, where you can run cells out of order and multiple times, one of the biggest annoyances with data scientists and with Jupyter Notebooks is keeping track of the state of all your variables. So we made that easier by building a simple variable explorer within the notebook editor. So all you need to do is just click on this variable explorer icon at the very top, and it will show you all the active variables within your notebook. So you can quickly see a lot of useful information, such as the name of the variable, the type of the variable, the size, and then as well, if you're given a preview of the value. If you want to take a deeper dive on what your data actually is, we have something called the data viewer. So if you click on this icon on the left, it will open up in what we call our data viewer. So this is like an Excel-like interface for array-like data. So this is a data frame and it puts in this Excel-like format. And what's really great is it's a lot more human readable for you as a user. You can sort by different columns. And the other really great feature is you can filter rows. So one really great example is maybe you want to make sure, let's say you have a values column, you want to make sure there's no negative values. You can just search for any values less than 0. So make sure nothing's negative. And you can see that this filter feature can be a really powerful tool in your arsenal. So let's go back to our notebook. Another feature I want to point out is something called Run by Line. So Run by Line is a simplified notebook debugging experience that lets you step through your code one cell at a time and examine the state of your code at each step. So to actually invoke Run by Line, you just click on the Run by Line icon within the cell, and you can see it's going to stop at the first line, and you can keep on clicking it to go and step through each line of your code cell. And as you stop at that, you can actually open up the Variable Explorer, and it will show you the current state of that variable. This is a really trivial example, but as you can imagine, if you have something like a training loop, you can step through each line of that training loop to ensure that your forward and back propagation calculations are correct. So that'd be one really great use case for this. So another cell below here that prints out a matplotlib figure of the top 10 worst case states in terms of cases. So again, I can quickly click Shift Enter to run that cell. And again, this shows this matplotlib. But if I want to look at this matplotlib in more detail, I can click on the top left icon, and it'll open up in what we call a plot viewer. So here it maintains a state and history of all my graphs. So maybe, let's say I change a graph, I can view the changes that are in the output. As well, within the plot viewer, I can do things like such as zooming in. So this is a trivial example, like I mentioned. But if you want to have more data, you want to look at your x-intercepts or see where it crosses each of the axes, this is where it can be really useful for. And the other great feature is that you can also save and export and share this plot with others. So if I can click on save, I can save this as a PDF or image file, and then quickly share that with others as well. So heading back to our plot again, or our notebook again, sorry. We also have full support now for custom IPy widgets. So what this means is that you can actually work with interactive plots and interactive data. So down here, we can see I have a cell right now of an interactive map of the United States relative to the number of COVID cases per state. And here I can just play with this graph. I can zoom in as well. And this just makes it a lot easier for the data scientists to work with this interactive plot rather than a static map. So finally, once I've examined all my data, done a lot of the data analysis to visualize the data, like I mentioned, if I wanted to actually model the data, do some model training with maybe a ML model, instead of having to train on my local machine, which is just a laptop, which might take many hours to do, I can actually leverage the remote compute power of a remote server. So let's say I want to use a server with a GPU that I have in the cloud. I can quickly do so by opening up the command palette again, searching for the keyword specify local or remote Jupyter server for connections. And if I click on that, I can click on existing. And here is where you can just type in the IP address or the URI of your remote server. So if you have a on-prem server from your work or company, or if you have a remote server in the cloud, you can leverage that GPU compute. Again, once you're on that remote compute, you can also click on the kernel switcher, and again, it detects all the kernels in your system, and you can switch between the kernels there as well. Last really cool feature I wanted to point out is something that we call Gather. So Gather analyzes notebooks and code dependencies within your notebook and helps you extract only the relevant code segments that are required to recreate a particular cell output. So to actually, for example, let's say I want to run Gather on this cell. Let's say I only want to get me the code that was required to generate this visualizer or this interactive map, and I want to share that with somebody. I can just click Gather by clicking the Gather icon in the top left in the cell, or sorry, top right in the cell, and it'll open up a new notebook. And as you see, it will only extract out the relevant code cells and the relevant lines of code within that cell that are required to generate this output. So you can see here, it left out a lot of the imports I didn't need, such as the matplotlibs, left out the code cells that were plotting out or printing out this matplotlib, and only got me the cells and code that were required to generate this output. Again, so to access Gather, all you need to do is go to the extensions tab and search for the keyword Gather, as it's a separate free extension as well. And if you click on this and install it, you'll see the Gather icon appear on already run cells, and you can just click on that to gather all that code. Finally, once you're done with your experimentation code, when you've gathered your code and you're ready to turn your experimentation code into production Python code, we made that again super simple by just clicking this export icon, and you can export it to a Python script where you can either just check it into GitHub or do whatever you want with it. So let's switch gears a bit. One last thing I wanted to point out is that everything you just saw me do within VS Code, you can have the exact same experience in your browser with GitHub Codespaces. So GitHub Codespaces is an all-in-one integrated dev environment within your browser. So what this means is you don't need to worry about setting up your machine, worrying about package management, worrying about compute, etc. All you need is a GitHub repo with your notebook, and you're good to go. So the main benefit with Codespaces is that you can work on your notebooks anywhere just because it's in the browser. And as well, you don't need to worry about compute, since you can leverage the compute power of the VM to actually train your model or do a lot of the compute-heavy tasks that you need to do, and not having to worry about migrating your project afterwards to like a remote machine that has more powerful compute. Again, if you want to check out Codespaces, all you need to do is just go to github.com/features/Codespaces. And you can see this is the exact same experience, exact same UI of everything we just did previously. So you can try out the Jupyter Notebook editor today. All you need is VS Code or Github Codespaces and the Python extension. And all you need to do is just quickly create a new Jupyter Notebook or just bring in your existing IP1 via Jupyter Notebook. You can find all the information you need to get started at the link on the screen, so aka.ms/notebooks, super easy to remember. And you can find my contact information if you ever want to reach out at jemew@microsoft.com. So thank you everyone for watching.